Kadosh Boker Or says the Mishnah Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says Bor shel Shnei Shutafin Avar Elav Harishon velo kisau v'Hasheni velo kisau. Right? Hasheni chayav. Imagine right now you have a pit that belongs to two partners, and when this pit, right, belongs to two partners, what happened is the first one went by and he didn't cover the pit, and the second one went by and he also didn't cover the pit. So the second one is obligated to pay for the damages of the pit. Amri, we said, bor shel shnei shutafin. When you have a bor of two different shutafin, hechi mishkachala. What's the case exactly? I understand that if you're going to hold like Rabbi Akiva, that he says bor b'shuto, you're going to be chayav. Mashkachala, so then you could find it in the case of a chatzer that belongs to two different people, and the bor belongs to two different people, and then afterwards they came and they were mafkir the reshut, but they weren't mafkir the bor. But if you're going to tell me now that they actually hold bor b'shuto is going to be patur, meaning that if it's in your possession, you're going to be patur from paying. So hechi mashkachala dechayav aleh. So when are you going to find a case where you're going to be chayav in such a case? It doesn't make sense, right? What? It was done in the Reshut Rabim. And if it's going to be in the Reshut Rabim, where do we ever see, right, such a case of a Bishut Rabim, a board of two Shutafim, that they're going to be chayav? What's going on here exactly? Yeah? Why? Because since the ground of the Reshut Rabim doesn't belong to anybody, it comes out that the Balabor, he did it Shelo Kadin. So how are two people going to be chayav on the same board? It's only the one that dug it. So says the Gemara, okay, so maybe they both made a shaliach. So if they both made a shaliach, it comes from both of them. The Amri and they told him, Zil Karilam, go dig it for us. Now Zil Karulu, and you did it, and Shiach Levar Avera. So there's no Shiach Levar Avera. Meaning this guy came in the Reshut Rabim, he dug a pit. He's the one that's going to have to pay for everything, not anybody else. He says, but they paid me. I don't care, they paid you. And Shiach Levar Avera. Right? I can come and pay a guy to rob a bank, and then the guy's going to say, sorry, they paid me to do it. Chazaku Baruch. Right, you could be your friend, your whatever it is, how do you say it? An accomplice. Thank you. You're an accomplice, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be chayav. The kara hay chamisha ve'chamisha. Okay, you know what? Each one of them dug 5. Each one of them dug 5 tfachim, and now I made it to 10. So nisalku leuma said rishon. So then the first person, when he dug the 5, it already is gone now. So hanicha leRebbi, this is good according to Rabbi. Right, that he says when in Nizakim, Mashkachala, that you could find it in Nizakim, that you could have two different partners that they're going to be chayav to pay. But according to Rabbi, right, even according to Rabbi, and it's going to be Tumita, right, which means that you're going to be chayav also in such a case, that they're going to be chayav. But according to Rabbanan, right, that they basically are coming and saying that even if the Be'amah came and it got damaged and it didn't die, you're still chayav to pay. What's the case exactly? How do you find the case of two partners that they're going to be chayav?
Because the action of the second one,
undoes the first one.
Yes.
Right?
So he completely sold only.
The first one. So the first one is completely patur, and the second one is going to be chayav. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan answers. Which one?
So why do we say the first one is responsible?
No, the second one's responsible. That was a Mishnah. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says, Kegon, right? She'akru shnehen chulya bevat achat v'yishlimu la'asara. What happened is that both of them, they went and they were taking a bevat achat, and therefore yishlimu la'asara tfachim, which means since both of them were finishing the bor, I don't care who did it first. Even if one of them dug the first 9 tfachim, it doesn't matter. Since they're both doing the finishing job, they're both obligated, right, for the pit. My Rabbi, my Rabbanan. What is the shita of Rabbi and Rabbanan? The Tanya of the Mount of the Braita. If one person comes and he digs a bore of 9 tefachim, and somebody else comes and he finishes off to the 10th tefach. The last one, he's chayav. That means even though it could be that he only dug 1 tefach, he's chayav because he finished off the job. Rabbi says, achar acharon lemita. We go after the last one to do with death. Right? But achar shneim nizakim, but both of them are going to be chayav for nizakim. Why? Because at the end of the day, it could still damage even if it's less than 10. So to do with the less than 10, they're both going to be chayav. But to do with death, you're right. It's only the last guy. My Tamad Rabbanan, what's the reasoning of the rabbis? Tamar Krabas, the pasuk says, v'chiftach o kichre. When you're going to open a pit, which means you're going to uncover it, or you're going to dig it. If you're going to be chayav on the pticha, al kriya lo kol sheken, obviously, meaning if you uncover it, you're going to be chayav. Kol sheken, if you dig it, you're going to be chayav. But rather we're coming and we're obligating you, if you dug one after another, that you completely remove the first guys, and therefore you're obligated to come and to pay the nezek that you caused. The Rabbi Amalecha, but that's the shita of the rabbis. The Rabbi Amalecha, but Rabbi is going to tell you, right? These two psukim you need it, kedamrinan, as we said above, which means that you cannot come and start saying that they're extra. You need both of them, right? Because we already learned this above. What exactly was that you need the two different things. You remember about that? If we said that maybe you're only chayav, that if you uncovered it, so therefore if you cover it up, right, you're going to be patur. But if you actually dug it, then you have to actually fill up with the earth. This was already that we learned 2 days ago or whatever it was. So he says, "V'Rebbi Amalecha, you need these subsukim. V'Rabbanan, but according to the rabbis, right? He says, Nami mitzach tziche. You also need them, right? So he says, why? Even according to the Rabbanan, you need two psukim. So therefore, why are you making an extra dirasha to come and say that we're talking about that it's digging after digging, and therefore you removed the first guy's digging? It's not true. You need these two psukim. So it says the Hainu Tamad Rabbanan, the reasoning of the rabbis is the pasuk says ki yichre ish bor velo shnayim. When it says ish, it's one person, not two people. And therefore, since the Torah is talking about one person and not two people, so therefore what happens is that he's actually coming and saying the Torah is excluding, right, one of them from paying. So it's obviously the first person. Rabbi, what does he do with this then? So the Rabbi Ahu Mibaile, he says, when it says ki yichre ish bor, he says velo shorbo. When it says ish, you don't exclude ish velo shnayim, one man and not two men, and therefore the first guy is patur. When it says ish, it's coming to exclude a shor, meaning what happens right now if a shor digs a pit, you're exempt. You don't have to pay for anything. Why? Because it says kichre ish bor. Only when a man is going to dig a pit. The Rabbanan trei ish bor kative. But the Rabbanan, they're actually going to say that since it says twice ish bor, so therefore that's why you have one to teach you that it's an ish and not a shor, which was like the Rabbi, and the second one to teach you one man and not two men, because it says in pasuk vechiftach ish bor or kichre ish bor. It says twice ish bor. So one ish bor is teaching you that only if a human being digs a pit and not an animal. That if the animal digs a pit, that was like Rabbi, if an animal comes and he digs a pit, you're going to be patur. Second one comes to teach you ish bor and not shnayim. One man is going to be obligated for digging the pit, and not two men that are obligated for digging a pit. Unless they both of them do it the last thing that we just mentioned before. The Rabbi, but according to Rabbi, I did the katavai. He says, no, but Rabbi doesn't hold of the two of them. Why not? At the end of the day, it's written twice. He says, no, once you already wrote one, you wrote the other. Even though technically speaking, you didn't need to. Meaning, according to the rabbis, each one was teaching you a new lesson. According to Rabbi, it's not that each one, really, Bemet, you only needed one. But at the end of the day, we're coming and teaching you this. Okay? He comes and he says, whoever said we're going to be mechayev, right, on the last one, maybe we're going to be mechayev only in the first one. So answers the Gemara, lo sal kadaitach. He comes and he says, no, why? The Amar Krabba, the pasuk says, ve'amet yelo. What does it mean now? Right, ve'amet yelo. He comes and he says, ve'amet yelo is bemi she'amet shelo. What does that mean? Right? We already said, right? One more time, right? We went and we said, how do you know that the extra lashon is coming to obligate you to pay this? Meaning the second guy has to pay. No, one more time. It says ish bor. Ish is one man and not two. So since it's not two, the first guy is patur, and the second one's chayav. Says the Gemara, maybe the opposite. Maybe the first one's chayav and the second one's patur. He started it. When you start something, right, you put the start of the fire. It could be that the second guy comes, yeah, great, but you started it, right? You know how they say, Amalek, why was he started it. Once he starts, everything, you're right, there's others that are going to come afterwards. But you started it, so it's the same thing. You come, you started, you get burnt. The other ones came, they did it also, they did even more. Doesn't matter. You started it. So says the no. Says why? Lo sal kadaita, because the pasuk says, Vamet yelo, hauda kamimita. It's the one that caused the death. Who was the one that caused the death? The second guy. Because the first guy that only did the first 5 tvachim or whatever it was, there was no death yet. So therefore, it's only the second guy that he finishes off the job to make a death possible So he's the one that's going to be chayav. So says the Gemara, 1 second, but I needed Vamet Yelo to teach you something else. How are you telling me Vamet Yelo comes to teach you that it's the guy that causes the death, that he's the one that's chayav and not the other one? One more time. Ishbor comes to teach you only one guy and not the second guy. We put the assumption, we assumed it was the first guy's patur, second guy's chayav. We assumed that. We asked, maybe it's opposite. So the Gemara answers, Vamet Yelo, the one that caused the death, and then now there's a death, he's the one that's going to be chayav. Ask the Gemara, I need Vamet Yelo for something else. For Rava, Rava says, Shor Psulei Mugdashim. When you have a shor, right, which is going to be Psulei Mugdashim, which means it was kadosh for a korban, and became pasul. So now you're allowed to actually do shchita and to eat it, right? So shenafal lebor, it falls into a pit. Patu, you're not obligated to pay. Shneimar b'setz pasuk Vamet Yelo, right? B'misha met shelo. It's only if the met belongs to you. Here, right, you can't eat it. Right? Which means at the end of the day, it doesn't belong to you. So therefore, right now, if you're telling me, Vamet Yelo, it's coming to teach you to do the Shora Mugdashim, right? So therefore, what's going on then? Right? How could it be? So he comes and he says, because that means I can't use it to teach you that it's the second guy chayav and not the first guy. So Amri, so they said, Velav mimela shemat mina. Don't we learn it mimela? Teve'ahu de'ava mita askinan. That's what makes the death. Meaning, how's the death being caused? Only because of the second guy, which means because that he came and he caused the death. Which means he says, that's mimela. Meaning, it's not like I needed extra to teach you something. When it says Vamet Yelo, automatically I understand that what are we referring to? That it's the guy that kills, and the only guy that kills was the second guy, not the first guy. Because the second guy was the one that finished off the pit to a dimension which could actually kill. So that was mimila. I don't need an extra. The extra, Vamet Yelo, meaning the fact that it's written, it was actually coming and teaching you the entire concept of that it's only an animal which actually the deceased belongs to the master. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, we're on the 2 dots on the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned to the Braita. Imagine right now, somebody comes and he digs a pit for 10 tfachim. Somebody else comes and he puts it to 20 tfachim. And somebody else comes and does 30 tfachim. Kulam chayavim. Right? They're all going to be chayav, which means don't think every single one is going to be chayav. So ask the Gemara, we have a contradiction. He says, 1 second, if you're going to dig a pit, which is 10 tfachim, but somebody else comes and he starts putting the clay, and the other one, so only the last guy is going to be chayav, not the first guy. So why are you telling me that the first one comes, digs 10, second guy advances it to 20, third guy, they're all chayav? Here it says mefurash that the first guy did 10 and he's patur. It's only the second guy that he comes and he does all those things, he's going to be chayav. So what's going on? Nun Aleph Amud Bet, 51b. So says the Gemara, Lima haRebbi v'haRabbanan. Why don't we actually just say that the Braita that comes and says that all of them are chayav is Shitat Rebbi? That according to Shitat Rebbi, even the first one that dug 9 tfachim is going to be chayav to be Mishalem Nezek. And therefore, according to Shita, when they come and they do it, each one of them is already chayav because each one of them is already dug enough in order to be mazik. But the second Braita that it says it's only the last guy, it's all according to Rabbanan that the rabbis learned ish velo shnayim. There's only one guy, not 2 guys. So therefore, it's only the last guy that's going to be chayav. So why don't you just say that this Braita is a machlok between Rabbi and Rabbanan? So Amar Razvid comes and he answers, Ha veha Rabbanan. No, I apologize. They're both Rabbanan. Why? Ad kan lo kamri Rabbanan. When does the Rabbanan say that Acharon is going to be chayav? Hechal lo avar kama shiur mita. Only if the first one didn't do the shiur. Meaning like this: if I only went and I went exactly until the line, but I didn't pass the line, so therefore, according to the Rabbanan, if somebody else comes and he pushes it across the line, I didn't do anything. So it's one guy, not 2 guys. I took it until there. Yeah, but I didn't cross the line. I didn't do it. I didn't cross the line.
For death.
Right? Yes, for death. So therefore, you can't hold me responsible. But if already the first guy already did come and cross the line, and then the second guy took it to another line, and the third guy, each one is going to be chayav. And that's what the Rabbanan are saying. Even the rabbis are going to admit that everybody is going to be chayav mita. So says the Gemara, fine. But 1 second. In this Braita, the first guy already was avar on the shiur because the first guy did 10 tfachim. The second guy came and he just plastered it and he did but the first guy already did 10. So why is the first guy patur? Why do we say in the Braita only the last guy is going to be chayav? So Amri, we said Hatam over there, there was still not enough fumes to kill. And he added it, meaning by him coming in and making it smaller, that's how he added the fumes in order that it should kill. So when he came and he plastered it beforehand, it had bigger walls. When I come and you start putting plaster, what happens? It starts shrinking. So that's what he did. So he made that there's more heaven. And since he made that there's going to be more heaven, that's why the second one is going to be chayav and not the first one. Heaven is the fumes. Right? Or I don't know how you call it.
Strange how these fumes work, I guess.
I do not understand fully, but that's what it says. Yeah? Okay, that's just what it says. I think it's the aftermath. That's what I think it is. I think it's that it's not from the actual.
You need oxygen to live, and if you're in some pit, could be that maybe.
So Ikadamni, there are those that say, Amar Razvid. Razvid comes and he says, Haveha Rabbi. Really bad, we just answered in Razvid that both of them, meaning both the Braita, everything was Rabbanan. It wasn't Rabbi. Everything was Rabbanan. And even the rabbis are agreeing in a case where it's going to be. All right, and he comes and he says, and everyone agrees in such a case where he's going to be doing shiur, that means that the first guy was already doing shiur mita, that he's going to be chayav. So Ikadam, some people say the opposite. Amar Razvid comes and he says, Havehar Rebbe. Really, Be'emet, everything's Rebbe. That which we learned that everybody's going to be chayav, Shapir is going to be good. So that which it said only the last one is going to be chayav, that it didn't have enough hevel for nothing. And the second guy came and he did, and he was mosif the hevel.
Why do the rabbis exempt the first digger if he made it 10 tefachim?
Because I'm not sure exactly how he did it, but he did it 10 tefachim, but it wasn't enough.
Oh,
there was no fumes.
Was it wide?
I guess so. I guess it was wide enough that there's no fumes.
Something about a wide. I saw something wide in the footnote.
Yeah, that's what he says over here. That he made it
extremely wide. Footnote 3, width was greater than its depth.
Yeah, and therefore that's why there's no problem with the heaven.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Another halacha.
So
yes.
Well,
no, it was deep enough, but since it was so wide, there's no
dissipated.
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
Okay. So now he comes and he says now like this. He says, right? Amar Rava. Rava comes and he says, if you're going to put an even on top of a board, so imagine you put an even right on top. Now the board was only 9 tefachim, right? Now you put right a stone, right, begova tefach, right, and therefore what happens is that now it becomes 10 tefachim. Yeah, banu lemachloket Rabbi v'Rabbanan. That's actually a machloket between Rabbi and Rabbanan, right? Are both of them going to be chayavim or not? Remember, according to Rabbanan, it's always only one person that can be chayav, but according to Rabbi, both of them could be chayav. So it says even Rapshita, obviously. So he says no. I would have thought to say lemata hu dehavla dide kakatile. Only if you dug downwards does there exist such concept, because then you're adding the heaven. Avalemala, but if you're just adding something from above it, telo havla dide, right? Kakati, that it's not the heaven. So imalo, I would say no. Kamashmalan comes teach you, right? In such a case, that even in such a case, the hevel is being added also from the top, and therefore that's why it's going to be still the same achloke between Rabbi and Rabbanan. That according to Rabbi, both of them can be chayav, and according to Rabbanan, it's only the last one. Okay. Next question by Rava. Rava comes and he asks the following question. It says v'tam tefach, which means, right? Imagine a person comes and he digs 9 tefachim, right? Another person comes and he finishes it to 10. And then he comes and he sotem 1 tefach, meaning he closes off 1 tefach that he just dug, right? Right? So, v'silek avanav. Ma, what's halacha? Mi amninan, do we say, okay, that's what we're asking right now. Are we going to come and are we going to say, right? Do we say my David Shakli, whatever he did, he took it away? Because he dug the extra tefach to make it 10, but then he covered it up again. Or maybe the second that he dug the extra 1, it's considered that the entire action of the first guy was completely removed. So now the entire thing is in your shoot. So therefore, the fact that you dug the 1, it's not yours. Because now it's 10 tefachim. You covered the 1, it doesn't matter, but the entire 9 is now yours. Because when you made it into the 10, it's yours. Take it. We don't have an answer. It's a good question. We don't have an answer. Amar Rabbi Rechana Amar Shmuel Bar Marta. Says Rechana name Shmuel Bar Marta. Bor Shmona. if you have a pit of 8, and you have 2 tfachim which are filled with water, okay, and the animal fell, you're going to be chayav, right? My tama, what's reasoning? Kol tefach temaya kitred yabasha dame. Something incredible. The pit was physically only 8 tfachim, but on the bottom of the pit, the last 2 tfachim were filled with water. And he comes and he says that water, for every tefach of water that you have there, it's considered like 2 tfachim of dry land. And therefore, even though it's only 8 tfachim in depth, since the last 2 tfachim you have water, it's considered 10 tfachim. Yeah? So he comes and he says, right? So,
No, 8 plus 2.
8 plus 2 is 10.
10.
No,
But how do they know
said
that?
that one is equal to 2.
Exactly. So if you
How
have,
do they know something?
if 1 is equal to 2, right? So you do the last 2 tfachim, which is basically tefach 7 and 8, right? Now become 9 and 10, because it's already 7 and 8. You understand? Meaning the last 2 tfachim, which are the 8, which is 7 and 8, it is already 1. So I'm just adding 1 to each one of those. Okay? So he comes and he says, or another question. Remember that we're going to answer take to this question as well. Right? Another question. Mor tisha umet. Oh, sorry, umehen tefach achad mayim. What else if you have 9? And one of them is a tefach. Yeah? So you have 9, and one of them, 9 tefachim, one of them is a tefach. Ma'u watzalacha. Mi amrina, do we say kemdelo nafisha maya? Do we say that since there's not a lot of water in the pit, right? So do we say leb behebla? There's no heaven. Or dilmar maybe given the unique tray, but since it's more deep, it behabla. Meaning here was a little bit different. Before it was only 8 tefachim, and you had 2 of water. Now it's 9 tefachim and 1 of water. So do I say that since you already have the 9 tefachim, right? So therefore the extra 1 makes it 2, so therefore you're 10. Or do I say no, that since anyway, right, you don't have a lot of water, so therefore maybe it's not enough, and therefore it's not, it doesn't have anything. Third case, 7. Now you have 7 and 3. Okay, 7 and 3. When shoshat tefachim mayim, do we say, given the nefisha mayim tfeid, since you have a lot of water, it behavla, you have the heaven. Well, or maybe since it's not deep enough, you don't have the heaven. Take. So in all these 3 cases, whether it's going to be 8, which of the 8 you had 2, or 9, which of the 9 you have 1, or 7, which of the 7 you have 3. I don't know why it asked it in that order, but that was the order of the Gemara, right? What take on all 3 of them? We do not have an answer. So we had take on these 3, and we had take on the previous one. So ba mine Roshizbi miraba. So Roshizbi comes now, and he asks from Rabba, Hirchiba. What happens right now, right? If a person comes, right, and he digs a pit 10 tefachim, the friend comes and he just makes it wider. What's halacha? Yeah, what's halacha? Do we say that he's also going to be chayav or not? Elmaleh, so he answers him, the opposite. This guy helped out. The first guy already dug the pit of 10, so he should be chayav for everything. The second guy, when he made it wider, he actually made it better now. Because by making it wider, right, he comes and he actually makes it that there's going to be less heaven. So now he's going to explain the question, right? Because we already said that before, that the wider that it is, there's less heaven. Elmaleh, so he comes and he says, right? He comes and he says, Adra, but the opposite. He comes and he says, when you're going to come and you're going to make this pit wider, it's more chances to fall. Imagine you're making it bigger, so now there's more chances to fall. Ela Ravashi, but rather Ravashi says, Nichzi anan ibehavlamit hare niet havla. He comes and says, why don't we just say that let's see how it died. If it's going to be dying because of the hevel, he was b'mayet hevel. And if it's going to die because of the chavata, because of the impact, check the cause of death.
Interesting.
If the cause of death was the hezek, the hevel, so therefore he was mimayet, so therefore he should be patur. And if the cause of death was the impact, so therefore he was mekarev zeka. There are other people, right, that want to say. Ravashi says, Nichsianan, why don't we just check? He says, which side did he fall? Remember, you made it wider. So let's say I made it wider on this side. So check which side he fell. If he fell on this side, I was mekarev zeka. But if he fell on this side, I was mimayet hevla. So if he fell on this side, I should be chayav. If he fell on this side, I should be patur. Just check where he fell. Yeah? So itma, it was stated. Yeah, and again, we don't answer, right? That means we're not answering, right, the actual questions. This is the shita of Ravashi, that each shita, how does he paskin, right? So he comes and he says, Itmar was stated, Bor she'omka kerochba. When you have a pit, the omek, the depth is like the rochav. Rabbi said, Rabbi Rabbi said, both say Mishmed Rabbi Chana, the name of Rabbi Chana. Tamar Mishmed Rabbi Yami, they both say the name of Rabbi Yami. Chad Amar, one of them comes and he says, Leolam yesh bahevel, it does have hevel. Ad she'er rochba yoter mkod. You always need that the pit is going to be more wide than depth. Because the more width that you have to it, the less hevel that you have. Chad Amar, one of them says, Leolam en bahevel, ad she'omka yoter rochba. That you will never have hevel until you have the omek more than the rochav. Okay, and therefore, obviously, you have the two different opinions over here. Says the two dots. Okay, remember, we're talking about two partners. The first partner passed by, he didn't cover it. The second partner passed by, and he didn't cover it. The rishon me'emat mifta. So it says the Gemara, when is the first one? When is he going to be patur exactly? When are you going to tell me now that the first one is going to be patur? He could just say that the chiyuv to watch over it should be on the second one by himself. Right? You can't say that it's both of them pass by it and the first one is going to be patura. Why? Right? Why Be'emet is the first one? The first one is just as negligent as the second one. Imagine you two partners. The first one, nothing happens. He ignores it. The second one is chayav. Why? The first one also was negligent. So Rabbi Yosef both of them come and say Mishmed Rabbi Chana, right? The Amar Mishmed Rabbi Mani says the name of Rabbi Mani. Chad Amar, one of them says Mishemanicho Mishtamesh. You left the second guy using the pit. V'chad amar.
You're good.
1 second.
I was using it.
He left them using it. So since he left them using it, obviously there was no problem over here. Right? One of them comes and he says, Mishim solo dalyo, which means that he actually gave over the kisui.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So says the Gemara, Ketanai. Really, we're talking about it's a machlokah tonight. Hamadle mayim min abor, uba chavero ve'amar lo, hanach li v'ani adle mayim, kevan shenicho mishtamesh patur. So again, it's a machlokah tanaim. Basically, this machlokah tanaim is that if somebody's going to come and he's going to take water from the pit, and his friend is going to come and he's going to say, Anachli vani adle mayim, right, leave me and I'm going to thing. So that's it. The second that he left him using it, it's going to be patur. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov comes and he says, Mishim solo dolio. What is the machlokah between them exactly? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov savar yesh breida. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that there is breida. Which means each one is using his own share. Which means that they have the 50, so each one is using for a banan sabri, and the rabbis hold breda, that there's no breda, which means there's going to be a machloket. Do you say breda or not? Breda means that do I say that retroactively I know exactly who each one's using their own thing. The Amar Ravina, and Ravina says, they both of them go according to the reasoning. The Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, Shutafin, Shenadru Hana'azem. When you have Shutafin, that they came and they were Noder Hana'ah from each other, Asurin li kanes lechatzer, they're not allowed to come into the chatzer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, each one is going to go within his own property. But what are we arguing with? Again, the same thing. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that there is breida. That means each one is going into according to his own property, his own reshut. Okay, but Rabbanan Sabri and the rabbis hold that there's not going to be breida. So again, you see the exact same thing. That means basically right now, each one comes and he prohibits hana'ah from his friend. So now they're not allowed to go, both of them, into the chatzer, because at the end of the day, you permit it, but each one is allowed to go to his own property. And the reason why is, do you say that there is breida or not? Meaning that when I come and I'm going in, this is mine, and the other one's his? Or do I say there's no breida, so I can't go in, because maybe that's his and that's not mine? So because of that, that's where the problem starts. That is going to be the machloket between them. So Amar Bilazar says Bilazar, Hamocher bor lechavero kivan shemasalo dalyo kana. If you sell a pit to your friend, and you gave him now the deli, to cover it, he already acquired the board. So says the Gemara, Hechidami, what's the case? If he bought it with money, so buy it with money. Do the kinyan with money. And if he did it with chazakah, so purchase it with chazakah. So answers the Gemara, Leolam bechazakah, really we're talking about bechazakah. He had to say, go acquire it. You had to tell him that. But once he gave him the deli, it's like that he actually went and he told them that. Aleph Amud Aleph 51A1. We're just going to start on the bottom of Nun Amud Bet 50B just by the story. There's a story which is going to be a few lines up, four lines up, where it speaks about Hahu Torah. There was a shore. It was an ox. That it fell inside of a little ditch of water. Right? This was a water, which it says actually here that it was usually an amah. Now an amah is 6 tefachim. It's not 10 tefachim. Remember that usually when you talk about an amah, every tefach is 8 centimeters. Every amah is going to be 6, right? 6 tefachim. So you got 6 of them. So therefore, it's not 10 tefachim. When we spoke about bor, a pit always had to be 10 tefachim in order to be chayav for bor of the death and all those things, if you remember. So he says over here, so there was a shore that falls into a ditch or a little irrigation canal that was of 6 tefachim. The shachte mare, and the owner, slaughtered it immediately. Some people, they don't like to wait, right? Right away, they do things immediately. They jump. And because he jumped the gun, what happened? Tarfeh Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman came and he said, sorry, it's a trefa. What does it mean it's a trefa? Trefa means you're not allowed to eat it. Why? Because it probably got damaged. And therefore, since the ox got damaged, you can't do anything with it. You can't even eat it. So therefore, trefa, gamarnu, it's worthless now. So Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Isha kilmare dehaitora kabba de kimcha. If this Bala Shor would have taken 1 kav of kemach. Kav is obviously a measurement. So if he would have bought 1 kav of flour, tzedala derech, in order to go, and the provisions to go would have been to go to the Bet HaMidrash. He would have went to the Bet HaMidrash, and he would have asked him. Yeah? And what would they have told him?
Is the kav of flour is the to eat in the
Yes, provisions for the way.
It's not a korban.
No. Tzedala derech is provisions for the way to go to the Bet HaMidrash. Yeah? So if he would have actually went to go to the Bet HaMidrash, and he would have asked the rabbis, Im shahata me'et la'et, if he would have actually just waited 24 hours, kshira, the animal would have been kosher. So therefore, this guy jumped the gun, right? The animal falls right away without asking, without doing nothing. He goes all wild, boom, he acts. Pahaz kamayim al totar. Remember that expression, right? Ani amarti bechovzi, kol adam kozev. When you do things bechipazon, when you do things too hastily, when you do it too quickly, many times you don't think. So therefore, the guy went, boom, right over. No. Calm down, think. He says all he had to do was he had to invest, right? He had to invest 1 kav of kemach to go to the Bet HaMidrash to ask. That's all he had to do. 1 kav of kemach he had to invest to go and ask. What would have happened? It would have been keshira if he would have waited for the 24 hours, because if he would have asked the Bet HaMidrash, he would have told him, wait 24 hours. And if it's still alive after 24 hours, it's not a terefa. And then it would have been kosher.
Presumably, it would have cost him this flour amount to go take the
1
bus
kav.
or to
That's what he said.
fee.
100%. So he says, Velo avsede letora d'shaveh kama kabe. And he wouldn't have lost the shore, which is worth a lot of kavim, not just 1 kav. Meaning, it's an investment question. If you would have come and you would have taken the time, right, in order to go to the Bet HaMidrash to ask, even if it would have cost you money, it would have cost you 1 kav, right? Let's say 1 kav, whatever the price is right now. It would have cost you 1, but you would have saved. Look how many kavs of the animal, because now that the animal's a terefa, it's worthless. So the Gemara is going to ask on Rav Nachman, and the Gemara says, 1 second. Alma kasava Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman holds yesh chavata bepachot me'asara, that there exists such a thing that even with less than 10 tefachim, there's such a thing that the animal could fall and get hurt. It must speak to die. What does a trefa mean? A trefa means that it's not going to live within the year, correct? And therefore, if it's not going to live within it, it's a trefa. So therefore, that's it. You're not allowed to eat it. It's called a trefa. The question is, if it fell into inside of a ditch, the ditch was not 10 tefachim. If it's not 10 tefachim, it couldn't have died anyway. So if it couldn't have died, why is Rav Nachman coming and saying it's a trefa? Why in the world is it a trefa? Does it make sense? He says, what? Can it become hit? Can it become damaged ad kebekach to die, even though it's less than 10 tefachim? So, what?
What's 24 hours in the week?
So 8 by Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava comes and he asks Rav Nachman, Hayu pechutin ma'asara tefachim. If it's going to be less than 10 tefachim, v'nafal letocho shoro chamor umet, patur. Right? The question is, the Rava comes and he asks the question from our Mishnah on Rav Nachman. He says, there's a Mishnah mefureshet. If right now you have an ox that falls down, or a chamor, a donkey, that falls into a pit and he dies, if the pit was less than 10 tefachim, the guy is patur. My time out, what's the reasoning? Mishum delebe chavata. Because since it was less than 10 tvachim, he shouldn't have died. And therefore, right, if right now through the chavata is being hit, right, by the pit, so therefore he's saying, I don't understand you. If the Mishnah is saying, you come and you dug a pit, were you allowed to dug a pit? No, but you dug a pit. And it was 5 tvachim, 6 tvachim. In this case, it was 6 tvachim. It was a ditch, which was an amal, which is 6 tvachim. Right? Let's say it's 6 tvachim. The guy falls in, right, the shor chamor. You're going to be patur. Why are you going to be patur? Because it shouldn't have killed. And therefore, the fact that it died, you're patur. That's not normal that it died. It must have had other causes, other pre-existing conditions, and it must have had a whole bunch of other things, and that's why it died. It doesn't make sense. So therefore, the same thing. So why is he saying now that it automatically becomes a trefa? It shouldn't have been a trefa. It was less than 6 fachim. It could have never killed the animal. Right? It could have never killed them.
If you didn't fall in this
but it doesn't matter. But that's pre-existing conditions, you're exempt. Right? But then you're a grama, you're a cause, you're an indirect cause, but you're not a direct cause. Meaning that you cannot say that it's a direct cause that you caused the death. It was obviously because of other things as well. That was a very, very big mistake that they made during COVID. Right? During COVID, everybody was write-offs and everyone's COVID, but they didn't realize that the majority of those cases was pre-existing of whether it's heart conditions or other conditions, right? Obesity and other things. And all of a sudden, if a guy gets a flu, even without a COVID, it doesn't need to be COVID, they'll die anyway. But that's just because of other existing, but it's a cause. It's not a direct cause. So if somebody's going to ask you, is that direct cause of death? The answer is no. Now, obviously, they were doing it for money. So they were, they have to cash in. So they did more and more and more. But fine. So says the Gemara Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. No. Mishum delebe havla. Says, you know what the reason why, if it's going to be less than 10 tfachim, you're going to be patur? It's not because less than 10 tfachim, he cannot die because of the hit, of the impact. It's because there's no hevel. There's no the fumes, we translated it, the fumes of this, that was coming up. How do you call it?
Foul air.
Foul air. Okay, fumes, foul air, whatever you want to call it exactly. Right? That was so therefore he comes and he says, really be'emet, even if it does not have 10 tfachim, it could kill the animal. But right, since it does not have on the hevel, right? Because hevel is only if it's going to be deeper, because if it's not that deep, it doesn't have such a thing. Okay? So ask the Gemara, Ihachi, if you're going to tell me that this is explanation, then that means Rava's understanding that the boar does not have hevel whatsoever. So he says, if so, huzak bo chayav, right? Why if he gets damaged, you chayav? We said in the Mishnah, if he dies, you're patur. But if he gets damaged, you're going to be chayav. If it doesn't have hevel, why are you going to be chayav? Hale behevla. Doesn't have hevel whatsoever. So Elmaleh comes and he says, no, there's always hevel. Right? There is hevel, right? There's en hevel emta. There's not enough hevel for death, but there's enough hevel for nizakim. Okay? Meaning, right, this is a famous concept, right? Do you say that there's it's 0% to 100? Or do you say, no, it goes up little by little? Right? And by the way, that goes in everything of science, right? The person could have, for example, batel b'shishim, right? If you're going to come and you're going to put something inside of a food, and all of a sudden now it's going to start being batel. You say that there's no taste whatsoever. No, it starts giving more and more and more taste the longer that it continues cooking and the longer, meaning, so here what he's trying to say is that it's not that there's 0%, right, of hevel, and then there's 100% of hevel once there's 10 tvachim. He says it goes up in percentages. The deeper that the pit is, the more hevel that there is, the more that these fumes there are. Once it gets to 10, then it's enough to kill. But until 10, it's only enough just damage. Okay? That's what we're saying until now. Now he comes and he says, 8 ways. So we're going to ask the following question now from another Mishnah. The Mishnah says, what is betaskila? We know that when a person gets sekila means they get stoned. But even though we say that it's called stoning, it's not the first step. The first step is they get thrown off the building. And only after they survive the fall from a 2-story building, then they get stoned. So it says over here, betaskila ya gavoa shte komot. We know that the betaskila was 2 stories high. And that's where they used to throw him down. Betania laim, we learned on the Spraita, vekoma shelo, right, which means that besides the 2 stories high, right, you have his height. Meaning, you have 1 story, 2nd story, and then the guy's height, right? So he comes and he says, right, so therefore, harekan shalosh, so it's mashma that it's going to be 3 stories high. Now he says, v'isal kadaitach. Now if you're going to tell me now, yesh chavata בפחות מ10, that there's going to be chavata with less than 10 tfachim, so lama li kulehai? Meaning, you're only telling me, right, that there's no fumes, but even on the impact, it's enough, right, to damage and maybe even kill. That's what we're coming and saying now. So the question is, why does the bet skila have to be so high, right? Even if it was going to be less than 10 tvachim, it could actually come and kill. But again, it's a indirect, it's a grama, because we said, right, that it was only because of the heaven. The heaven, it does not have enough until 10 tvachim, but it could kill just because of the impact. So therefore the question is, why do you need that this bet skila to be so high? So says the Gemara, right, v'litamech, and according to your reasoning, na'avid asara, right? So why don't you just do 10 tvachim? Make the bet skila 10 tvachim, right? Because you are modeh that with 10 tvachim, it's already enough to kill, right? So therefore, why don't we do that? Ella, but rather, Rav Nachman, like Rav Nachman. Tamar Rav Nachman, Rav Bavua, says Nachman, name Rav Bavua. Amma Akra, the pasuk says, V'avtar lecha kamocha. You have to love your fellow like your friend. What does that mean? You have to love your friend like yourself. And therefore, since it's V'avtar lecha kamocha, berur lo mita yafeh. You have to actually come and you have to get for him, right, a beautiful mita. What does that mean? You have to designate for him a good death. What does that mean? If you're going to come and you're going to throw him off from a short place, so therefore there's going to be more suffering, because probably the guy won't die right away, and it'll take time, and it could be that he got internal injuries and that, but you have to give him a good death. What's a good death? He dies immediately. You don't want that he's going to start, so what do? Give it to him much higher. So therefore the probabilities of him dying are much quicker, and therefore with much less tsar. So here you see that even for a guy that's chayav sekila, now remember, chayav sekila could be mechalel Shabbat or v'davdo zara. We're talking about a guy that's he's doing all these things, like right? Yeah. Always. You have to beror lo mita yafa. You have to get 2-story building and you throw him off. Okay? So says the Gemara, if so, nagbatve. If you're going to tell me now that you want to make sure that he dies, throw him off the Twin Towers. Yeah, so much higher. What are you going only two stories? Answers the Gemara, no. Mishum de menavir. What does that mean? If you're going to come and throw him off of the Twin Towers, by the time he comes down, what's going to happen to him? You're not going to get anything. You're going to get little tiny, pieces, little tiny limbs and organs. If you get anything, you understand, everything's going to be all over the place. So we don't. That's disgusting. That's not kavod for the Met. So therefore, you want to do it in a way that you are making sure that he's going to die immediately, but making sure that he's not going to come and going to become menuval. That's what you're trying to do. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara. One second. Right. So now he comes and he says like this. 8ve. So now we're going to ask the following question. When it says over here now, kipol anofel mimenu, what does that mean? That a person, when he's going to build a new house, he has to place a ma'akeh. And why does he have to place a ma'akeh? A ma'akeh is the rail, if you want to call it, or a fence, right, on top of the house to make sure that nobody falls. Kipol anofel mimenu. What does it mean mimenu? Right, the chashash, the suspicion is that somebody might fall, velo betocho, but we're not talking about that a person is going to fall from within it, right? What does that mean exactly? Right, which means it's only if it's going to be the gagabite is going to be higher than the Reshut Rabim. So therefore, it's going to be mimenu into the Reshut Rabim. The Torah says you have to do a ma'akeh. But if the gag of the house is going to be lower than the Reshut Rabim, right, even though it could be that a person's walking in the Reshut Rabim to fall into it, you're not obligated to make a ma'akeh. So Ketzar, what's the case? So he says, Aita Reshut Rabim gavoa mimenu asrat vachim. Right, this, by the way, many times could happen in Israel. Right here, doesn't make sense. How could it be that the Reshut Rabim is higher than the Reshut Yachid? Like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you're thinking the private domain is lower than the public domain. But many times in Israel, where everything's on mountains, you could actually see that sometimes you have the Reshut Rabim, which is going to be the public domain, right? And all of a sudden, the private domain is right below. So he comes and he says, if it's going to be the Reshut Rabim is going to be higher, right? 10 tfachim, v'nofel mitocha letocha, and you're going to fall from within it to inside the Reshut Rabim to the Gag, you're going to be patur. Amuka mimenu asrat tfachim, if it's going to be, right, deep, right, which means 10 tfachim, v'nofel mitocha letocha, and you're going to fall right from the gag to the Rishut Rabin, you're going to be chayav. Which means that here you see the difference between which one's taller. If the Rishut Rabin is gavoa, meaning if the Rishut Rabin is above 10 tfachim, and you're patur, you do not have to put a ma'akeh. But if the Rishut Rabin is lower 10 tfachim, so now you do have to put a ma'akeh. Okay? So v'yisal kadaitach. Now if you're going to tell me yesh chavata b'pachom asara, that there's going to be a chavata with less than 10 tfachim, which means that a person on impact could come and he could actually even die for less than 10 tfachim. So why do we need 10? Meaning we just put anacha, we just put that 10 tfachim, right? Even less than 10 tfachim, the guy could die. But a guy could die from the impact, not from the fumes. And that's why he's going to be patur. The question is, so then why didn't we obligate you in a ma'akeh? The pasuk says, Ki tivne bait chadash, right? He says, Lo tasim damim bevetecha, ki yipol hanofel mimenu. Lo tasim damim bevetecha, right? Is even going to be less than 10 tfachim, according to what we just answered. So why do we say that has to be 10 tfachim? If a guy could die with less than 10 tfachim, so even less than tfachim, it should have been put in a ma'akeh. So Elmaleh comes and he answers, Shane bait, a bait is different. Techol pachom me'asara l'baiti. He says, because if it's not going to be 10 tfachim high, it's not considered a house. And therefore, what we're trying to say is that Torah didn't obligate a ma'akeh only on a gag of a house. So therefore, since the house does not have 10 tfachim, it's not chayav a ma'akeh, it's not a house. Right? 10 tfachim is minimum for a house. You know what 10 tfachim is? 80 centimeters. You know what I mean? It means the guy is like, crawling into his house. You understand? He's not even, or he's a midget. You understand? But even 80 centimeters. Huh? Yes, same thing. Yeah. He says the Gemara, if so, hashtanami, so too the same thing applies here. Tehavi me'abrai asara, that you have the gova 10 tfachim from the outside, right? Dal mine tikra mazava. Take away the tikra and mazava. Tikra is going to be the roof, and the maziva is the gutter. Okay? So you don't have 10 tfachim on the inside. Meaning, you have 10 tfachim on the outside. You don't have 10 tfachim on the inside. Because you have the roof. The roof already takes up a certain amount of space. And the gutters. So if you don't. So Elmaleh comes and he said, he says, no. What happened was that he was chafar inwards, like downwards. So therefore, you're right. The actual walls actually only have 10 tfachim. Now, if the walls only have 10 tfachim high, it doesn't have 10 tfachim because the roof and it's already taking away. So you don't have 10 tfachim. But what you did was inside the house, you dug. So since you dug downwards, you do have 10 tfachim. The walls of the house are exactly 10 tfachim. But you dug downwards, and therefore you do have 10 tfachim. Okay, so says the Gemara, Yachiv, so, Ki lo avi me'abrai asara, mishkach ala da'avi me'gavai asara, ki gon dechak be'tzvei. Okay, fine. So continue doing that. Why don't you just say also, let's say you even have walls of 8 tfachim. But it doesn't matter. Because you dug so much deep, that's fine. So therefore, why do you say that a house has to have 10 tfachim, and if it doesn't have 10 tfachim, it's not a house? It's incorrect. It just depends how far did you dig deep. Remember, in the olden days, they had a dirt floor, so you could just dig, and now you have a lower floor, and now you have a big ceiling. So imagine, in the olden days, all I have to do is just dig, and then I have big ceilings. You understand? It's not like nowadays that you have a floor, right? And then basically you can't go down. No, you just continue going down. So says the Gemara, Elahainu, right? Tamad Rav Nachman, but rather the reasoning of Rav Nachman is, right, that he says, Savar mikreisa de Torah le'ara kama have. How much is the distance between the stomach of the shore to the karka? Between the stomach of the ox and the ground? Arba tfachim. Arita, right? So it's going to be 4 tfachim. Arita de dalai kama have. What is the shiur of the amatamayim? What was the shiur of the ditch? What was the measurement of the ditch that we spoke about, the irrigation canal? It was 1 amah. 1 amah is how much? 6 tfachim. So if the amah is 6 tfachim, and from the stomach of the shore downwards, it's 4 tfachim. So therefore, when the shore actually falls into the ditch, he's falling a distance of 10 tfachim. And that's why it's going to come and it's going to be able to kill. So therefore, it comes out that he could actually be hit. So therefore, even though the meaning even though the floor is only a distance, meaning the ditch is only, the bore is only 6 tfachim, but the impact is 10 tfachim. So says the Gemara, elamatnit diktani. So therefore, our Mishnah that says, ma bor, shu kedei la'amit 10 tfachim, af kol shesh bo kedei la'amit 10 tfachim, b'shitana misagya. So therefore, he asks 1 second. But then, why did the Mishnah say that 10 tfachim is enough? It's not correct. Even 6 tfachim is enough. Because according to your logic, you just did 6 tfachim for the pit, 4 tfachim of the animal, right, which is basically from the floor until the stomach, so it's only 6 tfachim that you need. And so the Gemara, Amni Matznitin, the Gandar Lebor. He says, our Mishnah is that the shor was lying down on the ground, and then he rolled into the pit. So therefore, since he was rolling into the pit, it's a direct hit that he needs 10 tfachim. It's not enough 6 tfachim. If Be'emet he was actually walking, so then you're right. If he's actually walking, technically speaking, it's enough 6 tfachim, because 6 and 4 is already 10. But here he's not walking. Here he's lying down. So since he's lying down and he rolls in, it's a direct 10, so you need 10. It's not going to be good if it's going to be less than 10 tfachim.